You'll never find anything better. My boss laughed when I handed in my resignation. You're nothing without this company. I smiled and said, You're right. Thank you for everything. His words sliced into me like they were designed to. 3 years of dedication reduced to mockery in an instant. The conference room suddenly felt too small, too warm. The resignation letter, pristine white against the dark wood of his desk, seemed to mock me as much as he did. I mean it, Lane, Carter continued, leaning back in his chair with that smile I'd grown to recognize, the one that appeared when he sensed weakness. Who else would hire someone with your limited qualifications? We took a chance on you. Limited qualifications. The phrase hung between us, while my mind flashed back to the 4 project proposals I'd developed that had revolutionized our client acquisition strategy, to the nights I'd stayed until midnight refining presentations he would deliver, to the 37% increase in quarterly profits directly attributable to innovations I'd spearheaded. Innovations he had presented as his own during executive meetings. The timing is unfortunate, he added, tapping his gold pen against my letter. The international expansion project needed someone with vision. Not that you were in the running for it, but I had been. I'd researched that expansion for months, presented a comprehensive strategy that the board had praised. My application for project lead had mysteriously disappeared 4 times. The position went to Carter's golf buddy who'd been with the company for exactly 6 weeks. I appreciate the opportunity you've given me, I said, maintaining eye contact despite the heat rising in my cheeks. This seems like the right time for a change. Running away because you can't handle real responsibility, he said, sliding my letter into a drawer. Go ahead. I'll enjoy watching you fail. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't been rejected from that expansion project because I lacked vision or leadership qualities. I'd been rejected because I was already being considered for something far greater. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to thank everyone who's taken time to listen to my story. If you've ever felt undervalued or overlooked at work, please drop a comment below. I respond to everyone. And if you want more stories about workplace justice, hit subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. Okay, now back to what happened with Carter. My name is Lane Nakamura, and until 3 months ago, I was a strategy developer at what everyone considered the top firm in our industry. I graduated from a state university with honors, but no prestigious connections. I worked twice as hard as my colleagues, with Ivy League backgrounds and family networks. I arrived first, left last, and volunteered for projects nobody wanted. People described me as quietly brilliant. I observed patterns others missed and found solutions where others saw only problems. I also had a habit of standing up for younger team members when supervisors tried to bully them, which didn't win me any popularity contests with management. Carter became my supervisor after a company restructuring 2 years ago. He had a talent for identifying promising work and ensuring his name appeared on it by the time it reached the executive level. His favorite phrase during team meetings was, Lane's initial outline had potential, but I saw what it could become with the right guidance. The day I handed in my resignation began like any other. I'd arrived at 7:30 a.m., reviewed client feedback, and updated 3 project timelines. At lunch, I did what I'd been doing for the past 4 months. I slipped away from the building and walked 6 blocks to a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. Most of my colleagues assumed I was hitting the gym or catching up on podcasts during these breaks. Nobody questioned why I never joined team lunches anymore. Nobody noticed when I returned with a notebook full of scribbled ideas and questions. Nobody suspected I was meeting with Vieira Wilson. Vieira wasn't just anyone in our industry. She was the pioneer who had transformed the entire field 15 years ago, before mysteriously stepping back from public life. Rumors about her retirement had circulated for years. Health problems, a family crisis, a secret government project. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Our first meeting had been accidental. I'd attended a small industry workshop that most professionals considered too theoretical to be practical. The session ran long, and I found myself alone with the presenter, asking questions that apparently nobody had posed before. The presenter later introduced me to Vieira, who had been observing from the back row. You see connections others miss, she told me that day, studying me with intense focus. It's rare. That initial conversation led to another, then another. For 4 months, we met during my lunch breaks, discussing innovations and possibilities. I never mentioned my workplace struggles. I focused on solutions, creative approaches, and industry growth potential. She tested me with increasingly complex challenges that required fresh thinking. Sometimes I succeeded brilliantly. Sometimes I failed just as spectacularly. But I always learned. What I didn't realize during those early meetings was that Vieira hadn't actually retired. She had stepped back to identify the right person to implement her vision for the next evolution in our field. She was interviewing candidates, but not in any conventional way. "I've been watching how different minds approach problems," she explained during our 15th meeting. "Most people stick to established pathways. You create new ones." 2 days before I resigned, Vieira made her offer. "I'm assembling a small team," she said, stirring her tea. "The board has approved extraordinary funding based solely on my recommendations. I want you to lead implementation." The position came with triple my current salary, substantial equity, and the chance to direct the most ambitious project our industry had seen in a decade. It also required complete confidentiality until the public announcement. "Why me?" I asked, genuine curiosity overriding my excitement. Vieira's answer changed everything. "Because when systems fail people, you don't just complain, you build better ones." The day after my resignation, Carter sent me an email. "When you fail out there, don't come crawling back." I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the next 3 weeks training my replacement, who deserved better mentorship than she would receive, and tying up loose ends on my projects. My colleagues whispered about my foolishness for leaving without another job lined up. I let them believe what they wanted. I cleaned out my desk on a Friday afternoon while most people had already left for the weekend. As I carried my small box of personal items through the empty hallways, I wondered if I was making the right choice. Was I abandoning a difficult but secure position for something that might collapse before it began? The doubt lasted exactly 17 seconds. Monday morning, I walked into Vieira's newly established headquarters, where a team of 12 innovators awaited direction. By that evening, we had mapped out the framework for a revolutionary approach that would either transform our industry or fail spectacularly. 3 weeks after my departure, the announcement hit every major industry publication simultaneously. The headline alone made my phone explode with notifications. "Industry revolutionary returns with groundbreaking venture. Names unknown talent as Chief Implementation Officer." The photo showed me standing beside Vieira Wilson. According to my friend who still worked at my former company, Carter was hosting the quarterly board meeting when the news broke. A board member reportedly interrupted him mid-presentation by sliding their tablet toward him with the announcement displayed. His face went completely white. He stammered through the rest of his presentation, which, ironically, included several concepts I had developed that he'd previously dismissed as impractical and too ambitious. That same afternoon, his name appeared in my inbox with a connection request and a message. "Congratulations on your exciting new role. Perhaps we could discuss potential collaboration opportunities." I didn't respond. Not yet. The first 6 weeks at Vieira's company were both exhilarating and terrifying. We worked 14-hour days in a converted warehouse space, the windows letting in natural light while we reimagined what our industry could become. For the first time in my professional life, my ideas weren't just heard. They were challenged, refined, and implemented. "You need to present this to the board yourself," Vieira told me when we prepared for our initial investor meeting. "They need to see the mind behind the concept." "Wouldn't it be better coming from you?" I asked, thinking of all the times my voice had been replaced by Carter's. "They trust your reputation." Vieira's expression hardened. "Is that what you learned at your previous company? To hide your light?" The question hit harder than she could know. I'd become so accustomed to having my contributions diminished that I'd started to expect it. Something inside me shifted that day. I spent the weekend rewriting the presentation, infusing it with my voice, my vision. When I finished presenting to the board, there was a moment of silence before the chairperson leaned forward. "This approach is unlike anything we've considered. The risk is substantial." My heart sank, but before I could respond, she continued, "So is the potential reward. You have our full support." That night, Vieira and I celebrated with the team. As everyone chatted around us, she said quietly, "Your former boss has reached out to me 3 times, trying to arrange a meeting." My stomach tightened. What does he want? What people like him always want. to be associated with success they didn't help create. She studied me. He doesn't know you're the architect behind our central innovation, does he? I shook my head. While the announcement had named me Chief Implementation Officer, the specific nature of our project remained confidential. Only those directly involved understood that the revolutionary approach we were developing had emerged largely from concepts I'd been refining for years. Ideas Carter had repeatedly shot down as unrealistic. He will find out, Vieira warned. Be prepared. She was right. 8 weeks into the project, we selected 10 companies for our pilot program. The selection process was rigorous and blind. Companies submitted proposals without knowing who would evaluate them. Our team assessed each submission based on specific criteria without seeing company names. When the final list was compiled and the names revealed, my former company wasn't on it. The next morning, Carter called my personal number. Lane, he said, his voice dripping with practiced warmth. It's been too long. I've been trying to reach you. I've been busy, I replied, keeping my voice neutral while my pulse raced. What can I do for you? I wanted to congratulate you personally. Working with Vieira Wilson, that's quite an accomplishment for someone at your level. At my level, the subtle dig wasn't subtle at all. Thank you, I said, offering nothing more. I notice our proposal wasn't selected for your pilot program, he continued. There must have been an oversight. Our submission met all criteria. I took a deep breath. The selection process was blind, Carter. No names were attached to proposals during evaluation. Every submission was judged solely on merit. The silence that followed told me everything. Their proposal hadn't been good enough, not because I'd manipulated anything, but because the ideas weren't innovative enough. The irony wasn't lost on me. Had Carter allowed my strategies to be implemented during my time there, they might have made the cut. Perhaps we could meet, he suggested finally. For old time's sake, I could provide some guidance on your project. That won't be necessary, I said, but thank you for the offer. After we hung up, I felt strangely hollow. I'd imagined confronting Carter would be satisfying, but instead, I just felt tired. There was too much important work ahead to waste energy on the past. Or so I thought until 2 weeks later, when the industry blog TrendWatch published an interview with Carter. In it, he claimed that the innovation at the heart of our project had originated in his department. The fundamental approach was developed under my leadership, he stated. While certain elements have been modified, the core concept came from our team's work last year. My phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues. Some expressed outrage on my behalf. Others asked if Carter's claims were true. Vieira forwarded me the article with a single question mark. I sat at my desk, staring at his words until my vision blurred. This wasn't just about credit. It threatened our project's integrity. If people believed we'd simply repurposed existing work, our credibility would suffer. Vieira called an emergency meeting. We need to address this immediately. Legal is preparing a cease and desist letter. No, I said, surprising myself. That's exactly what he wants, to force us to reveal project details prematurely. We need a different approach. The team looked at me expectantly. For the first time, I shared the full history, how Carter had systematically buried my proposals while claiming credit for my successful work, how the innovation they were now implementing had been rejected 3 times when I presented it at my former company. I have another idea, I said, one that solves 2 problems at once. My plan was simple but effective. Rather than engage in a public dispute over ownership, we would accelerate our timeline for the next phase. Expanding the pilot program to include 5 additional companies. We would open applications to all qualified organizations and evaluate them through the same blind process. If Carter's company truly understands the innovation as well as he claims, I explained, their next proposal should reflect that understanding. If not, they'll expose their own deception. Vieira considered this. It's risky. We weren't planning to expand for another month. The team is ready, I insisted. And this approach lets the work speak for itself. The announcement of our expanded pilot went out the next morning. Applications flooded in, including one from my former company, submitted within hours of the announcement. The evaluation team, which didn't include me to ensure impartiality, reviewed each submission. When the results came in, the scoring placed Carter's company last among all applicants. Their proposal demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the very innovation he claimed they had developed. Rather than publicizing this failure, I suggested something else entirely. Invite Carter to the quarterly review meeting, I told Vieira. Let him present his company's understanding of our approach to the board and the other pilot companies. Vieira raised an eyebrow. That's either brilliant or cruel. It's transparent, I countered. If he truly believes they originated these concepts, he should be able to articulate them. The invitation went out with language Carter couldn't refuse without losing face. An opportunity to share insights as a thought leader at a gathering of industry innovators. He accepted immediately. The quarterly review was scheduled at our headquarters, with representatives from all 15 pilot companies. Carter arrived early, dressed impeccably, as always. When he saw me, he grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. I wasn't expecting to see you in a meeting at this level, he said. Will you be taking minutes? I smiled. Not exactly. Before I could elaborate, Vieira called the meeting to order. She welcomed everyone, outlined the agenda, then introduced me, not just as Chief Implementation Officer, but as the lead architect of the entire innovation framework. Lane will guide us through the technical aspects before we hear from each company about their implementation experience, Vieira announced. Carter's expression froze somewhere between shock and disbelief as I took the center position and began my presentation. I outlined the theoretical foundations, the practical applications, and the early results from our first pilot group. When I finished, the room burst into applause. Everyone except Carter, who stared at his hands. Next, representatives from each pilot company shared their experiences implementing our framework. The results were uniformly positive. Efficiency increases beyond projections, cost reductions exceeding targets, unexpected benefits in adjacent processes. Finally, it was Carter's turn. Vieira introduced him as representing a company interested in joining the program. She invited him to share his understanding of how our innovation would integrate with his company's operations. He stood slowly, straightening his tie. Thank you for the opportunity, he began. As I've mentioned previously, many elements of this approach originated with our team's work last year. A murmur ran through the room. Carter sensed the skepticism and pivoted quickly. However, today I'm more interested in exploring how we might contribute to the next phase of development. That's when I did something unexpected. I raised my hand. Actually, Carter, I'd love to hear more about your claim that your team originated this approach. Can you walk us through the specific elements you developed and when? The room went completely silent. Every eye shifted between us as Carter's confident smile faltered. He cleared his throat, adjusted his watch. Well, I wouldn't want to bore everyone with technical details, he said. The parallels would be obvious to industry insiders. I insist, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. This is a room full of industry insiders. We're all eager to learn. Carter's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies. The core methodology regarding client transformation. Please be specific, I interrupted. Which aspects exactly did your team develop, and when? The panic in his eyes was unmistakable now. He fumbled through vague statements about innovative approaches and forward-thinking strategies while avoiding any concrete claims. With each evasion, his credibility visibly diminished. Then Vieira stepped in with the moment that changed everything. While Carter collects his thoughts, I'd like to share something with the group. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with a slide containing a simple timeline. This shows the evolution of our approach, including dated records of every concept development session, test implementation, and revision. The timeline showed my contributions dating back 2 years, with documentation that could only have come from one source. My heart nearly stopped when I realized what I was seeing. As some of you might know, Vieira continued, before approaching Lane, I conducted research into multiple companies in our sector. Part of that process involved speaking with board members, including those at Lane's former employer. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Vieira hadn't randomly encountered me at that workshop. She'd been watching me for over a year. Board member Wu was particularly impressed by proposals repeatedly submitted by a strategy developer, but never implemented, Vieira continued. He provided copies of these proposals as examples of untapped potential within the organization. On screen appeared copies of my rejected proposals, complete with Carter's dismissive comments in the margins. Comments like, too ambitious for someone at your level, and this shows fundamental misunderstanding of market forces. the same concepts now forming the backbone of our revolutionary approach. Carter's face drained of color. Those documents were internal. Indeed they were, Vieira agreed, which makes your public claim to have originated them particularly problematic, both ethically and legally. The meeting concluded shortly after. Carter left without speaking to anyone, his rushed departure leaving a vacuum of awkward silence. As other attendees gathered their materials, Vieira approached me. "I should have told you earlier about my conversation with Wu," she said quietly. "I wanted to see if you'd mention the stolen credit on your own. Why didn't you say anything when you published that interview claiming credit?" "Because how you handled it would tell me everything I needed to know about your leadership potential," she replied. "You chose transparency over retaliation. That confirmed I'd made the right choice." Later that evening, as I sat alone in my apartment processing everything, my phone lit up with a message from Morgan, my former desk mate, who still worked under Carter. "You won't believe what happened. Emergency all-hands meeting. Board member Wu was there. Carter's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into misrepresentation of company achievements and suppression of innovation. Wu mentioned your name 4 times." I stared at the message, unsure how to feel. This wasn't the revenge I'd imagined. It was something more complex. The following weeks brought an unexpected twist. Rather than fading into obscurity, Carter emerged at a rival firm with a dramatically different story. He began describing himself as the discoverer of overlooked talent and claiming he'd intentionally pushed me to leave so I could flourish elsewhere. "Sometimes the greatest leadership is knowing when to let someone go," he said in a business podcast interview. "I recognized Lane's potential required a different environment to fully develop. My first instinct was fury. He was rewriting history to cast himself as the mentor who launched my career. But when the podcast host reached out for my comment, I saw an opportunity for something better than revenge. Carter taught me valuable lessons," I told the host. "He showed me how easily good ideas can be buried in toxic environments. That knowledge shapes how I lead my team today." The host asked if I felt Carter deserved credit for my success. "People who try to claim credit for others' achievements are actually advertising their own insecurity," I replied. "I'm focused on creating environments where everyone's contributions are recognized." That interview changed everything. My inbox filled with messages from people sharing similar experiences. Young professionals asked for guidance navigating difficult workplace dynamics. Industry leaders sought my perspective on fostering innovation. 6 months after my resignation, our approach revolutionized the industry. Companies using our framework reported unprecedented results, creating a waiting list for the next implementation phase. My former company finally qualified as a Tier 3 participant, paying premium pricing for late adoption, and on the approval form authorizing their participation. My signature, alongside Vieira's. The final twist came during an industry awards ceremony where our team received recognition for the year's most transformative innovation. As I concluded my acceptance speech, I spotted a familiar face in the audience, Carter, watching from a side table with an unreadable expression. After the ceremony, he approached me at the reception. "Congratulations," he said, extending his hand. "I always knew you'd go far." I smiled politely. "Thank you. I've been reflecting on our time working together," he continued. "There might have been miscommunications about certain presentations and credit allocation." "Miscommunications," I repeated. "Is that what you call it?" He lowered his voice. "Look, we both know how things work. Everyone steps on a few toes climbing the ladder. That's where you're wrong," I replied. "The best leaders lift others as they rise." "Sweet sentiment," he said with a dismissive smile, "but unrealistic in the real world." "Actually, it's working remarkably well for us." I gestured toward my team, celebrating together across the room. "Our retention rate is 97%. Every team member has implemented at least one major innovation. Nobody feels the need to steal credit because everyone gets recognized for their contributions." His smile faltered. "Your company is the exception, not the rule." For now, I agreed. But we're changing that, one organization at a time. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm. "Wait, I need to ask. Was it all planned? Did Vieira approach you while you were still working for me?" I considered lying, just to let him believe he'd been outmaneuvered from the beginning. But the truth was more powerful. "No," I said honestly. "I had no idea Vieira was watching. I just kept doing good work despite your efforts to diminish it." The rest happened because good work eventually gets noticed. I rejoined my team, leaving Carter standing alone with his champagne flute and his regrets. 1 year after my resignation, I received an email from Wu, the board member who had preserved my proposals. He was now chairing an industry ethics committee and invited me to speak about creating environments where innovation flourishes. Your former company has undergone significant cultural changes, he wrote. Carter's replacement has implemented a transparent attribution system ensuring all contributors receive recognition. They credit your departure as the catalyst for this transformation. That night, I finally responded to Carter's original connection request, the one he'd sent the day the announcement of my new role went public. Thank you for everything, I wrote. You were right. I was nothing without your company. It pushed me to find somewhere I could be everything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's creating a world where others won't suffer as you did. Sometimes winning isn't about destroying your opponent, but transforming the game itself. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of workplace transformation. I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever turned a negative situation into unexpected success? Remember, your next chapter might be your best one yet.